everybody. Welcome in. How's it going? Tuesday afternoon. I almost said Friday. That's how much going to the rink today threw me off. Just in the middle of July, I was like, "Oh, it's Friday." Clearly, ooh, you
I
look
mean,
you look like a dream sequence. I'll tell you what. I'll take you out while you clean up that lens, and then we'll bring Megan back in. Um, Dev Camp day one for the Colorado Avalanche, as well as free agency opening today league wide. It is funny how a lot of this stuff does seem to match up. You end up with the game day on trade deadline day. Well, we end up with Dev Camp on free agency day. What a weird free agency it has been. Again, not just for the Avs, but I'm talking league wide. I think she's ready.
hey,
Hey,
it was
love it.
already kind of messy to start, so I was like, "Oh, let me just wipe it really quick," and it got
Yeah,
worse.
it looked like we were dealing with like the dream thoughts of Megan,
Which
which
would be a lot about prospects,
I
so
was just
not
about to
so
say.
weird.
Today, days like today are a bit of a dream sequence for Megan. We were down at Dev Camp, day one for the Avs. Megan, I was saying while you were cleaning your camera, weird free agency day. Like I don't even really have much to say about it so far. You and I mentioned on our way out, there's been a couple more um, rumors floated out there tying Nikolai Ehlers to the Avs. So we'll get into a little bit of that, but let's start with Dev Camp. Day one, a lot of teams got on the ice yesterday. This was the first day on the ice for the Avs. I'm going to ask you broad strokes, and we're going to continue to make reference. So let me just say it here off the top. Development camp is a lot about skills work. It's hard to determine a lot about an individual player purely from dev camp, let alone one day. But with that, Megan, you were far and away, without question, the most dialed in media member to what was going on the ice today. So who stood out to you among the groups that we saw? A handful of camp invites, really only one goaltender for the Avs that's even under contract for the organization. So, taking again all those grains of salt, what popped off the ice to you today?
Yeah, so the first group, a lot of the forwards. Christian Humphreys, one of the standouts of that group, and then kind of a tier below Humphreys for different reasons, different context. Riley Connors, just a little bit of an older player, and so the polish that he had in some of these drills, I expected him to have, just because he is a little bit older, a little bit more experienced, played in the East Coast League just a little, so has some pro games under his belt. So expected a little bit of polish, but Riley Connors won, Christian Humphreys won, and then Lucas Wallen. He's one of the development camp invites, and another St. Thomas kid in addition to Cooper Gay, which leads me to Cooper Gay. That might be the standout of the morning alongside Christian Humphreys among the forwards. I've been pretty high on Cooper Gay since they brought him over and I got to see him in his first AHL game. He scored a goal, battled below the goal line and just really fit in at the pro level so quickly. But since we're just doing broad strokes, those were who stood out to me among the forwards. And then among the defensemen, I really love Linus Funk. I obviously tweeted about my early impressions. And what I'll say too, if anyone was there watching, it was clear to me that the altitude was affecting a good amount of the players. And so you could see the fatigue set in at different points of the session for different players. And so Linus Funk was a player who had a really strong start in his session and started to look gassed by the end of it. And so I wouldn't assess things like his skating, his edge work at the end of the session because I think he was just tired. I think the way that he started was really encouraging. I continue to like Sage Weinstein and Sean Barron's coming off of a torn, was it ACL?
Yep.
He looked really good. I know he's been skating for a little bit, ramping up for this. Still in a no contact jersey though, so not quite at 100%, but really encouraging to see his edge work and the power in some of his cuts given what he's rehabilitating and coming back from. So those were kind of the standouts off the top. And then there's this tier of players that I expect to stand out maybe in different ways. And so Delelche, the recent draft pick, he had some of the best edge work of the defensemen alongside Sage Weinstein. And then Connor Kelly and Hank Kempf, two guys who got a little bit of pro experience at the end of last year. And so I kind of unfairly grouped them in a different category too, where I'm watching them a little bit less because what I'm seeing is where I expect them to be at. Right. It does separate from their peers a bit, but what I liked about Linus Funk is in the way that these groups got separated to do these drills, he was doing a lot of drill work with Connor Kelly and Hank Kempf, and Linus Funk obviously has his like Swedish junior hockey league experience under his belt. And I thought that he really kept up with the pace of things alongside two players who've gotten some pro games here in the American League under their belt. So really encouraged by a couple different storylines coming out of both groups among the forward and the defensemen. But that's what a show is for, so you can talk about it all.
That's right. Let's start with Cooper Gay. That was so, when we were all talking this morning, part of what's tough about Dev Camp, Megan, is a lot of the guys that you're watching out there. There's a lot of guys who are looking to earn contracts for the first time, guys who are at their first pro camp, trying to, inch their way, excuse me, onto an NHL roster or into an NHL organization. Cooper Gay is a guy that we saw get in AHL games last season. You mentioned right away that you were high on him. Let's dive in on this kid a little bit, because this is one of the guys who actually was on the ice today, that there is an outside shot that we do see him in NHL games, maybe even as early as this season or the following. What is it about Cooper Gay that is popping so much? I mean, like you mentioned, from the first time that you watched him up in Loveland.
Yeah, well, so thankfully I got to see him in game action, which is so much more beneficial than just in a dev camp setting where it's just drills. So having the benefit of seeing him in a game, it's his compete that stands out in a game setting. But in a drill setting, the skill side is what I'm really encouraged by, because he has a lot of poise in threading the puck. That drill where it's under the stick on either side. He showed a lot of poise and control of the puck. And Cooper Gay is one of the bigger players at this camp, 6'4", and so his skating, the way in which he utilizes his length and his reach to create time and space for himself to better protect the puck, it kind of complements his skating, which there were other players that I don't, a day into dev camp want to speak about maybe concerns around other players, but I think the way that Cooper Gay utilizes his size with his skating is really efficient and encouraging for what he could become at the pro level, because it's a necessity. And so there is so much more control in what I saw in him in drill settings. And so that little bit of puck skill that I was able to see kind of showcased in this setting, what was also encouraging about Cooper Gay.
Next, I want to talk about Sean Behrens, and we actually have a soundbite here from Sean Behrens. So yeah, let's get your thoughts on him. Or do you want to hear from him first, or give your thoughts first?
We can hear from him first.
Let's hear from him first then. Sean Behrens, yeah, crazy injury last year. Good to see him back on the ice. Here is Sean Behrens.
Getting back and trying to recover as quick as you can, and be ready for this training camp. So just kind of looking forward to getting back on the ice and being a part of the team again and playing hockey. So I couldn't be more excited.
How much of the recovery is obviously physical but mental too? Because you're thinking, I'm going to start my pro career, get it started here, and then now you got to wait another year essentially.
Yeah, it's tough. Obviously, I was really excited for last year. I thought I had a great opportunity. Obviously things didn't work out that way, but just kind of being able to be with the team up in Loveland and do all my recovery there, and still be a part of that group. And our team is awesome. A lot of great guys, great leadership on that team. So being able to learn from them was great, and I thought that helped a lot mentally.
Where are you at in there?
Really close. I should be cleared for contact here in a couple weeks, and looking forward to be ready for training camp. So really close to being back full go, and I couldn't be more excited.
That was my next question. Just after going through that kind of rehab and all that, just how excited are you to even be back on the ice, not clear for contact yet?
Yeah, it's awesome. Like, kind of having last year taken away from me in a sense sucked, but it kind of fuels you a little bit more to have another opportunity and be able to have another crack at it. So I'm really thankful for how everything worked out last year. Even though it was tough circumstances, it was a really good year, and I thought I learned a lot.
How much time did you spend around the team, stuff like that, when you were out?
Just about the whole year. Like, I was at the rink during their practices, doing my recovery, working out. So just being able to be around the team, hang out with them a little bit, that was huge for me. Got to golf a little bit at the end of the year, so that was awesome. Just kind of getting to know the guys for next year. So it was huge to be around them pretty much the whole year.
Did you get to spend time around Gabe?
A little bit, yeah.
Were you able to pick his brain at all about dealing with an injury that takes you away from the rink like that?
Yeah, a little bit. Having him around was really cool. And, his injury was obviously way worse than mine, way more grueling. But seeing him go through that, watching that documentary, you relate to it a lot, and just seeing a guy like that come back from a worse injury kind of helps your mind, and kind of helps you mentally being ready to go for next year.
Ooh, there we go. That's better. Now we're not tiny. That was Sean Behrens. Was looking to make his pro career debut last season. And Megan, what got caught off there a little bit at the beginning as we were getting that scrum going was freak injury. Someone fell on him at practice. You said leads to the tear. What'd you think of Sean Behrens today?
I was really encouraged because I thought he had a good camp last year with the Avs, and then he went over to the Eagles training camp, and that's where the injury occurred. And so he didn't even get a fair shake at things. Like he got a taste for it after his final year at DU, but it was supposed to be his full runway of season at the pro level. And I think his attitude is what stood out to me about the difficulty of being robbed of such a crucial year when it is such a competitive environment for Colorado's depth on defense. Like, you have to be really confident in yourself to sign in Colorado and kind of put yourself at the bottom of that rung to compete for a path to the NHL here, just given how solid the talent is at the top, with the Taves and Makar, but even to see the struggles, but the challenge for a player like Malinsky, who popped so immediately coming straight from college, it wasn't even a clear, easy path for him, that he's had to fight for NHL minutes every step of the way. So to not have that year for Sean Behrens was a huge bummer. But what I was encouraged by is, especially given the nature of it being a knee injury, the mobility, the agility, the power in the cuts, the edge work, these drills that they do at center ice kind of around transitioning, he was still leaned on as the experienced veteran player to show other players how to do this drill. And I thought that he even had a jump on the fully healthy players doing it. And so I still have Dolce and Weinstein kind of as my top guys for edge work, but Behrens is a league above them in my eyes. And I think once he's fully healthy, that will be something that shines through, hopefully, coming into training camp when he's at 100%. But I was so encouraged that one of the strong suits of his game didn't appear worse for the wear, given the nature of that injury.
Well, I was going to say that's the thing about it for me, is the nature of the injury. To see him, even let me take it even a step back. When I saw his name on the dev camp roster, I thought that was a huge positive. To to see him out there today, and he told us in the interview, like, I'm getting close. I'm getting closer to being back, to being ready. Like I said, seeing his name on the roster, I thought was a big win. But then to see him out there moving comfortably, didn't, like you said, still a little bit of that pop, not really afraid. And like you said, being leaned on as one of the more mature guys. And then I do love that he hung around with the Eagles last year. I know that maybe wasn't fully up to him all year, but like, in it being what should have been his first year pro, I think being able to get that experience and just see what it's like for the guys who are going through it day to day. What's that grind like, being in meetings, things like that. I think that speaks to his maturity and is what gives me a lot of confidence in that. Yeah, he's going to come out of this like he didn't really miss a beat.
Yeah, I like to, he said specifically that he's using this as motivation. He recognizes that it's a pretty unfortunate position to be in to have not had that first full year pro. And so I think it just motivates him then to come to camp, stronger, better, faster, because of not having that year of opportunity to showcase his talent.
100%. Before we get to Dill Eche, there was another name that you just threw out there. Or is there someone else that you'd like to highlight before we get to Dill Eche?
As long as we talk about Linus Funk at some point.
Yes. Oh, I've got him on the list as well. What was the other name that you just said, though? You said that you had Barron's third behind.
Oh, Sage. Okay. And also
Sage
Weinstein. And I keep saying Weinstein with like a heavy E. And I heard him saying it himself in one of the Avs social videos. So I need everyone to bear with me here as I retrain my brain to say Weinstein.
And there was also a report out there that it was Funk. Linus Funk. I heard someone ask him, and I heard him say it's Funk.
Yes.
So yeah,
it would have been hard for me to say Funk
every time.
So, anyways, Linus confirmed himself. It's Funk.
Yes, Funk. But Weinstein. Yes. What were your thoughts on Sage today? 'Cause he was another one that popped for you last year.
Yeah, well, and so he didn't get to compete in the rookie tournament because of an injury. So I got to see him in the dev camp setting, if I'm not mistaken, and not in the rookie tournament, which was a bummer because you always learn more in game action. But I think he had a pretty productive year in Spokane. And so when I'm looking at the depth chart, even through the Eagles on the back end, I'm still not sure where to place him because this does seem like it's the year for him to take that leap, right? But I am not sure, especially they just re-signed Jack Ashan, which is exciting for the Eagles. I like his skating. I think it stands out as a strength, but I still feel like there are other aspects of his game that I want to see a little bit more polish before I can start dreaming on the pro readiness or the NHL upside of this player. But the skating is encouraging by itself. It fits the way that Colorado likes to play, especially in those transition drills. Him being a standout because of his edge work is an extremely encouraging thing.
Yeah, like I said, this is just it's a player that when, you have multiple years in a row where it feels like he's jumping off the page. And like you said, there's some expectation there. Oscar Olausson finally wasn't at this camp. And I'm not trying to take a sideswipe at Oscar Olausson, but when you're seeing kids that are, at this camp or at the rookie tournament multiple years in a row, with every year they get older, you want to see them start, that separation from their peers a little bit. And the player that we started with, Cooper Gay, again, that's a player where it's okay. You got some pro games last year. So now can you look like a player that's gotten in pro games? Or with Weinstein, like, can you look like a player that has been here before up against kids who have not? And to me, those are the types of just little benchmarks that I try to keep an eye on with the players who are at these types of camps or tournaments year after year.
I think the stability in his skating, it's very controlled. It points to a player that's pretty strong in his skates because he's listed at 6'1", but he doesn't quite look 6'1". This is where seeing him in a game setting too, and if that physicality holds up better in that environment, it will go a long way then. Because obviously Colorado has a lot of undersized defensemen in its system. And so to have a 6'1" player with such great skating, very controlled, like I said, that could be a huge asset in the depth chart down the line. And it's a good foundation to build upon, too, if the other aspects of his game are pretty rounded out. So I'm excited to see. I won't be able to watch the scrimmage, but I will be excited for the rookie tournament when that finally happens, to see Sage in particular, because I was robbed of it last year.
One player that is a defenseman over 6'1", but will not be at the rookie tournament is Francesco Del Lecce.
I heard him saying his own name too, and he says it very quick.
Oh, he does?
Yeah.
Lecce?
That's pretty good. Okay. I'm not the authority on it, but I think that's pretty good.
Because the apostrophe in there makes me feel like I got to split it up into different, De Lecce, Francesco De Lecce.
Perfect.
He was someone that you said popped in terms of edge work, skating, and he himself said that his skating was one of the things that he felt was his strength. Let's hear what Francesco had to say today.
This is a high-class organization, and I'm super grateful to be here and be drafted by this team, so I'm really excited to what the future holds.
Where were you when your name was called?
I was at home with family, just hanging out in my backyard with family. I'm a big family guy, so I think it was the best way to do it.
And what was your reaction when you learned it was the Colorado Avalanche?
I was shocked. The high-caliber players that play here, I think, there's a lot of guys here that I watch and kind of look up to and try and model my game after, so I was really excited.
Being at UMass, I imagine a player like Cale Makar has left quite a legacy there. Can you tell me a little bit about how that presence, the impact he had on the program, is felt to this day?
Yeah, to this day, he's still talked about my teachers I take classes with, not even just in the hockey aspect. They talk about, not only he was a great player, but a great person, so I think that's something that our school tries to preach and something that I'm also trying to become.
Pretty impressive freshman year, solidifying a role on that second pair with Larry Keenan. Can you tell me a little bit about how you handle that responsibility?
I'm a player who likes to play in those big moments, so I think it wasn't something that I was afraid of, and playing with Larry I think helped out a lot. We were deep pair last year as well, so I think that familiarity definitely helped, and the chemistry was a big part of our success this year.
Where would you describe your strengths as a player?
I think my skating and my brain are my biggest assets. I think when those are going, I'm at my best.
And looking at this last year, where would you say your biggest area of growth was?
I think every young defenseman needs to improve on their defending, and I think that's just something I'm going to continue to grow until for as long as I'm playing hockey. So I think that's just something I'm going to keep chipping away at.
Heading into next season, what's the biggest thing you're hoping to taking out of camp?
I think I want to continue to grow into a bigger role next year. I'm a year older, not a freshman anymore, so I think both offensively and defensively I want to have even more of an impact next year. Hopefully camp will help bring that.
So that your skating is one of your strengths. Obviously that's something this organization preaches. Just one day on the ice working with these coaches, do you already feel like you're taking stuff away from it?
Yeah, for sure. I feel like there's always stuff to learn. You want to continue to get better at what you're already good at, and I think I'm definitely learning a few things here.
I went to the draft a few times. Did you kind of have a feeling this year was going to be the year?
Yeah, I think I've been confident in my abilities and just trusting the process, and I think this year was definitely my most successful year of the three, and I think I kind of answered a lot of the questions that were around of my first 2 years, so I think that's my most confident year going into it.
Obviously, a lot to me of Cale with your coach, but your coach is Greg Carville's coach was Zdeno Chara. Guys did you pick his brain a lot about defense and what he's kind of?
No, I think my success this year doesn't happen without Carv. I think I've learned so much since stepping on campus at UMass, and I think he's a big part of my success. He's it's defensemen they've not just Makar, but a number of defensemen too, and I think I've learned a lot, and I got a lot more to learn from Carv.
And being in Hockey East, you've played opposite of Taylor Makar on Maine. What was your experience defending a player like that?
He skates like the wind, so I think it was a unique experience. I think he's a tough matchup, but a lot of fun.
Great young kid, very well spoken, and I liked a lot of what we saw from De Lecce today. Off the ice, give us a little bit more of your thoughts of what you saw from him on the ice today, Megan.
Yeah, so the strength of skating, I feel like I'm sounding so repetitive, but it goes back to edge work, powerful cuts. That obviously lends itself well to a transition game. And it's even little things like these drills kind of around the circle where you can see the edge work showcased, and different players had to take wider berths of motion, and Delici didn't have to. He just was so much more in control of his skating. And then the other thing I hadn't mentioned yet was his shot. It had a lot of power behind it. And so it's one of those things where it didn't always hit the net. And so the accuracy, detail, obviously in a drill setting, I'm not going to get too hung up on that, but the power behind it did stand out. And that is something that I have seen and heard about coming out of his freshman year, UMass. Like, I love to hear him say that he has bigger offensive goals for next year in addition to becoming more well-rounded defensively, because he still led all defensemen in points. So I really want to see that side of his game showcased over the next couple of days, because I think he is offensively very gifted, and the power behind that shot, his willingness to take it in a game setting, I think is what has given him so much success. And so even just seeing the power behind it in this drill setting, it excites me a lot. And I love the marriage of what I saw on the ice today and then the confidence of the young player in that locker room. I think the road ahead for a player like him to carve out an NHL role is going to be a long one, and it's going to be one that requires patience and a lot of belief in himself. And I think he has it. And that was really encouraging too, alongside what I saw on the ice.
Let's get into Linus Funk, and then we'll switch our attention to the underwhelming free agency day. But Linus Funk, another player taken by the Avs just this past weekend in the draft. You wanted to make sure we got here. What is it about Linus Funk that you liked so much?
He stood out a little bit more than the others for different reasons, right? Like I saw the strength of skating in some of these other players, and I think to start the day, I saw the strength of skating in Linus Funk, especially in that drill where you're kind of protecting the puck and you're getting around side what in a game setting would be something like an attacker, right? But they're not really aggressively attacking. But what I liked about this is Linus Funk is a little bit of a bigger skater. And so he sort of uses some deception to bait that skater into him and then uses power to push off and create space that way. And so it requires a little bit of patience, really good timing, but also you're simultaneously, stick handling, protecting the puck in that moment. And you need to still be pretty mobile to pull all of this off in one fell swoop. And so I thought the combination of all of these things at once reinforced everything we heard about Linus Funk coming out of the draft, right? We heard that this is a player who is very detail oriented. And so this is why this kind of similar drill where you play down low and you stop the puck along the wall and then you move it to the blue line and you take a shot. A lot of players, really completed the first part of that drill with 100% effort and then kind of mailed it in on that shot to the net. And what I liked about Linus Funk is he not only settled the puck pretty well along the wall, but that shot from the blue line hit the net every time. And to me, that's just an extension of that feedback around this being a really detail-oriented player. I think even when you could see he was so fatigued in the final drills of the day, this is where tape to tape things weren't really connecting for him, but he was still seeing it through to the end. Like he would retrieve the puck, recollect it, and make sure that he at least completed this drill and it ended on the tape of another player's stick, even if he fumbled it a little initially. And I chalk that up to fatigue, but I also want to shout out that commitment start to finish, to see something through. Even when he was clearly gassed, coaches knew it, teammates knew it, like it was definitely obvious. He was smiling throughout the whole thing too. He seemed like he was having a blast the whole day.
That was my favorite part of your tweet. Like, and he's doing it all with a smile.
And he's doing it all with a smile. And so what he teased early on in his poise, the way he just made other things seem so much easier for him, come so much easier to him. I think everything that we heard about him coming out of the draft, right? He's really well-rounded, this foundation. It's not like he's prioritized any one part of his game. I can see exactly what they're talking about. And to me, that is a canvas that is so rich with opportunity. And then you just look at the size, like on the ice, if he was a forward, his physique reminds me of Sampo Ranta. And so I'm excited by like the physical tools that are there, the fun that he seems to be having, the confidence that he had. It's day one. I'm not going to get carried away, but I really like this pick. A day later, it's aged very well.
I don't know if you're going to scare people or excite people with the Sampo Ranta comparison.
Look, two entirely different players. I just mean the physical build, very similar.
I was really high on Sampo Ranta coming out of that camp.
And it's because he had all the physical tools to be a power forward. He just didn't have the right mentality to put it all together. And I think Linus Funk being this really detail-oriented player, I think he's a high IQ player to put this all together in the right way. And he just needs to continue to build it with more reps and a willingness to absorb the information that's given to him.
We'll be back for day 2 tomorrow. We'll have a podcast from Family Sports for you guys for tomorrow. And truthfully, that was part of what we were planning today. But Megan, we said, well, let's be responsible here and let's actually wait a couple of hours, because I'm sure something's going to come down the pipeline and we're going to be upset that we didn't get a chance to talk about it. Nothing really has come down the pipeline so far. Megan, this has been one of the stranger free agencies that I can remember in a long time. We thought cap going up. While there's not a ton of exciting names out there, we think guys are going to get paid. There's going to be some extra money floating around. Teams are going to get a little frisky. And wow, this should be a really fun day. That all turned into, hey, let's see if every single potential free agent can re-sign with their club 48 hours before free agency is set to open. The day opened at 10 a.m. Mountain with not a lot of interesting names that were available. And of the ones that are out there, there are still a lot of names sitting around. Corey Perry going to LA might be the most headline-y grabbing move of the day so far. What have you thought of this? Do you agree with what I'm saying? Do you prefer that? I don't remember the last time we saw this many players come off the board, in the 24 hours leading up to the open of free agency.
Yeah, I think that this free agent class was just a little bit weaker on the whole too. And so I think that's why it hasn't packed the same punch as past ones. But no, I share in your assessment of it. I think I'm not entirely upset that the Avs haven't been more active, because as I'm seeing some of these deals coming through, there are very few that I feel the Avs, I wonder if the Avs were in on that. Could they have gotten that type of a deal done for that kind of money? There's a few where I think the Avs are fortunate to have missed out on this deal, because that would have been way too rich for their blood. Specifically like Jonathan Drouin at 4 mil. I'm excited to see him get paid, but we struggled to justify going above the 2 mil that he had been making this last year on the Show Me deal. And I think you'd even hoped, is there a universe where that even is lower than the 2? Would he agree to something like a 1? And I off air had talked about maybe they can incentivize with a low base salary and bonuses on top, like the Jamie Benn. But if he could go command 4 mil in, New York with the Islanders, I don't necessarily blame him, but the Avs just can't afford to spend that kind of money on a middle 6 player, where they've got kind of a Landeskog penciled in for that second line, and with a Netchis and a Lehkonen and a Nichushkin and a Nelson and a McKinnon, obviously, it's kind of complete. And so at that point, it's just a luxury then to have Drouin as an option to help round out that top 6 spot duty up there. And I wasn't entirely convinced of his fit on a third line, especially one that doesn't have Charlie Coyle anymore. So I'm just looking around the free agency like, you know what? I'm sad to see Jonathan Drouin go, but I kind of understand it. Same story, repeat it with Ryan Lindgren. That's a player that I had interest in Colorado keeping on into next year, not at $4.5 million.
Right.
Not even for a year. Like that's $4 by $4.5 million. That's a crazy contract. I'm seeing the Seattle fan base weighing in kind of nervously even around this contract.
Well, and you're saying that as this show has been maybe some of the we've been some of the more outspoken vocal supporters of what Ryan Lindgren did.
Yes.
In his time with the Avalanche.
And
Like I
have an offensive slant.
I did not have an issue with what Ryan Lindgren brought to the Avs in his time with the team last season, to the point where I think we had a show last week where you and I were saying like, hey, get this money right and bring him back. Like, I thought he fit nice on that third pair. Man, a whole season of him next to Sam Malinsky. Like, yeah, let's see it. I'm with you. When I saw 4 by 4.5, it's like, no thanks. No thanks. And again, that was what I thought we were going to see all over the board this year. And even to your point about Drew N, like, hey, here's a player that is, maybe in a command a little bit more than what he would in a normal year. And, all that stuff. And really those two players in particular have ended up with contracts where I'm with you. It's like, yeah, I don't think the Avs would have wanted to get involved in that. And as you see a lot of this day continue to unfold, I think it becomes a lot more clearer why Chris McFarland said the other day, we may be tempted to go more the trade route than the free agent route. I think we're seeing a lot of that play out today. Like you said, not a great class to begin with the guys that we assumed, would be heading to market, now suddenly not heading to market. Then, of course, you also had guys like Elias Pettersson, Jordan Kyrou, who had no move clauses kick in that a lot of folks thought they would be on the move ahead of that. And just a lot of that has failed to materialize.
Not to be dramatic and go on a tangent, but
be dramatic.
A little crazy to me that in the JJ Peterka trade with Utah, that Utah and St. Louis had some form of conversations where Jordan Kyrou was on the board. Like, to me, that would have made so much sense in terms of a return for Buffalo to be interested in. For Peterka, it is crazy to me that even with Kyrou on the board as an option of a player to be moved. And look, I understand they just really coveted filling in that right side with a true right-handed defenseman, I guess, and get a depth player on top of it, turn that into 2 roster players instead of 1. But holy cow, the fact that Jordan Kyrou was a possibility to be moved and that didn't materialize, that was viewed as like, actually, we have a better trade in mind. That's crazy to me.
That is crazy. You just mentioned Utah, a name that came, again, a trade name that came off the board last night that I really thought would have been a super fun fit for Colorado was Matias Maccelli, going from Utah to Toronto. Have you had any trades or anything that you've seen, whether it be players re-signing, trades, anything like that, I think you and I both mentioned deals that we think the Avs come out on the winning side of by not being a part of? Do you have any deals that you've seen go through that it's like, man, that would have been a good one? And if the answer is no, that's fine.
No, I have to think about it a little bit. Like, I'm looking at some of the defenseman deals that have come through today, and there's a few that I think glad the Avs weren't a part of, like Cody Ceci. Nick Perbix intrigues me at $275. I think that's starting to be more the value range that Colorado needs to be targeting. But none of these, they're really low level, like, maybe they missed out on that. And the way that I see it is, when free agency opens, I think that everybody has a little bit of a free agency bump in terms of what you're going to be giving up to sign that player, because there's competition and because this is a weaker free agent class. And it does seem like there are a lot of teams who want to bolster up defensively that are overpaying some of their defensemen in return. Then I don't want the Avs to be a part of that. I think that they can find value, and I'm not talking, I just blanked on his name, Calvin DeHaan type value for next year. I think that they're starting to narrow down the complexion of this decor. And that's why I think it's good business to get Malinsky qualified and extended through the next year. I think it's interesting that it's only a year. But
Yeah,
I don't want the Avs to jump at the first thing as soon as free agency opens. And I think that's what kind of we're seeing happen today. And I'm glad the Avs aren't a part of it. I don't want them to make any impulsive decisions because I think there are a few paths to solving some of the holes in the lineup that they have. And I don't want them to overpay to do it because I don't think they can afford to.
Yeah, and I also don't think they need to right now. Within just the last couple minutes, Lars Ellers gets a 1-year deal, $1.25 million in Ottawa, and then Philip Tomasino and Connor Dewar, each 1-year deals in Pittsburgh. Neither of those guys were qualified. They're pending RFAs, and had they, they did make it to market, but I know those were a couple names that were at least intriguing RFAs to make it to market. They both do re-sign with the Pittsburgh Penguins. Parker Kelly gets a 4-year deal today, a 4-year extension. That doesn't kick in till next season. I think you and I are both fans of that right there. But I want to address something that came through the chat a minute ago. And Megan, it's chatter that we've been hearing since Friday. Among national reporters, there continues to be this sense of Chris McFarland, Joe Sakic, and the Colorado Avalanche are up to something. Kevin Weeks tried his hardest to tease that it was Sidney Crosby on Friday. George Laraque didn't help that situation. By all accounts, it's not Sidney Crosby. Megan, I guess when you hear the Avs are potentially working on something big, do you have something you're hoping for? Or, do you even have anything? I did a radio hit today and they said, what do you think it could be? And I said, look, knowing these guys, it's usually something a bit off the board that we didn't see coming. Do you have any thoughts on what, Emily Kaplan was reporting today, Kevin Weeks reporting over the weekend? And really, I've seen several people, Elliot Friedman, Chris Johnson, all also suggest the Avs are up to something.
I do think they're up to something, and I don't think it's Sidney Crosby. It kind of feels like it's a red herring too, that like front offices are probably so gleefully accepting that we're going to chatter about Sidney Crosby and there's actually something else entirely happening. And I believe that there's something else entirely. I don't know. I could see like there's players I'd love to be, this is such an unfounded rumor, but like any murmurs around Tage Thompson being that is discussed. I haven't seen a really credible source saying that Buffalo has any interest in moving this player. I just think Buffalo has parted ways with players kind of willy-nilly this offseason. So I'm like, well, maybe I won't rule it out. I won't close that door. That would be the kind of player that I'm interested in. I guess too, like,
I love that one.
Is it still with the Pittsburgh side, but we're looking at what Evgeny Malkin is doing because he'll be a free agent this next year. So I don't know. I do think it'll be something that comes out a little bit out of left field and is certainly not the Crosby to Colorado rumor, but I do think it's something.
God, I love the Tage Thompson one. You and I have talked about that for a while now. This was something that I had a source tell me last year around the trade deadline when the Avs were on Middlestat that conversation actually started with Tage Thompson and eventually landed on Casey Middlestat. But Megan, like to your point, that so is something like what I'm talking about, where it'd be like, whoa, the Avs acquired Tage Thompson. Nobody had that. That is the kind of stuff that the Avs do. Like when you get around this time of year, Chris McFarland puts in the man hours on getting some of these deals across the line. And they're usually deals that you did not see coming. I like Tage Thompson, and then we all did joke about that with Malkin over the weekend, where it's like, God, are we all thinking it's Crosby that the Avs are going to trade for this center out of Pittsburgh, and it ends up being Malkin? I don't know. Like, there's enough smoke around the Avs are up to something that like the tease on all of it isn't that it's some bit part maneuvering they're doing here.
Interesting.
What?
I'm just looking around the league. Like, Utah's been very active, and there's other players that I've had interest in. They still have so much cap space to work with. I really think that Utah is going to be vying for at least a wild card spot seriously going into next year. I think they're well managed finally, and I think they're building a real contender in the future. You know, I think it's going to take a little bit for it to all come together, but that's a team that I am watching closely and have interest in.
I have picked them to make the playoffs as my dark horse team like 4 years in a row.
It's
And
time.
they keep
It's real this time.
It's real this time. All right, you know what? I'm back in. Utah Mammoth back to the playoffs finally. But you know, in all seriousness, how about this Western Conference, Megan? Mitch Marner to the Golden Knights, like it just it's an arms race every year, and it does not seem like that is going away anytime soon. What did you make of Brock Besser? 7 years back with the Canucks. You go all the way to free agency just to do a new max term?
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's a good contract, but he might have been able to leverage a bigger contract. So I'm not exactly sure then what the gap was between, you know, his management and Vancouver that led to all of this hubbub. But okay. It's a great value for Vancouver.
We do. Hey, this one, the before the insiders were able to get to it, Anaheim Ducks, Mikael Granlund. That's another team that has been quieter than I was expecting. I think they were hoping a couple other guys would get to free agency because they were going to be aggressive. I think that's a nice ad for that team that is clearly trying to move the needle this season.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense to kind of round things out for them, but I don't know. I'm still looking at Dallas's cap, and it's crazy how they're supposedly in on so many conversations. I don't know how they plan to do anything.
Right. What else you got, Megan? I don't really got much right now. I mean, like I said, we're just waiting for more news to break. There's part of me that's saying, let's jump off on the off chance that we're going to have to jump back on for an emergency pod if the Avs do get up to something crazy.
Yeah.
I just don't, and I guess we should, Ronnie, Attard, Attard?
I think it's Attard.
Ronnie Attard signed a 1-year deal. That's a 2-way contract. This is an AHL signing, maybe a guy that, you know, gets a call up here and there, maybe in that John Ludwig type of role in terms of call up and down. Any thoughts here?
Yeah. I think people are being really weird about his name, first and foremost. So I'm just begging people to be a little bit normaler about this. And then secondly, it's a depth signing. Like, I know there are probably some people who are so checked out of any and all of our development camp conversations because they're like, how are any of these players going to help the Avs win a cup in the next 5 years? And that's a fair point. But
Totally.
Organizations need prospect depth, and they need a depth chart to call upon. And he's a big 6'3" right-handed defenseman, and there's a familiarity with him. Like, he was coached under Lapierre, skills coach Angelo Ricci, both ties to Colorado in different ways through the Philadelphia Flyers organization. So probably have, you know, kind of word of mouth, firsthand insight into this player that I don't think he comes into Colorado then just this completely unfamiliar territory. 26 years old, so, you know, not a prospect by any sense, but I think just a different, I always get tripped up on this word, a different mold of defenseman than what is currently represented in the depth pipeline. Like, yeah, Jack Ashon gets re-signed today. That's the small puck moving defenseman. this is just a sort of different look at a different player on that right side for Colorado to have in the depth chart. And I think you have to have that. Like, you have to have an American League team. So it makes a lot of sense to me. I like it.
Well, let me lob this at you. Mikael Granlund now is tied with Troy Terry for being the highest paid player on the Ducks. $7 million a year, 3 years. That is more money than I was expecting Mikael Granlund to get.
Ooh.
He just got the Brock Nelson deal. More or less.
What? I guess.
That was the best possible response. You can
Pause the podcast. Pause the podcast. There's one. This is the same Mikael Granlund.
Yep.
Hold on. Pause.
From the Stars. Yep.
From the Stars, but previously with Nashville. That's what I thought.
Yeah, you are thinking of the right guy.
You guys, he was like a 3C in Nashville. And I had interest in him for Colorado too, but like,
sure,
that's a lot of money. I don't want to say anymore. That's all.
And I mean, like the Ducks have a ton of cap space to burn, so like I get it, but I mean, look, these are far from how I judge, everything, but Dom Lucian has his player analytic models and he puts out his player cards and they all include, even during a season, like, what's the market value of a player playing in this position with these types of numbers? Like, historically, what's the market value? Mikael Granlund just signed for $7 million a year, went into free agency with a rough market value around 3.5. So again, the Ducks have a ton of money to spend, so whatever, but like, whoa.
He's 33 years old. That's a little bit bananas.
That is a little bit bananas. FU26 says, I'm a big hockey fan, but of the major four sports, they're the lowest paid by a mile. NBA free agency also opened this week. And we were just talking about that at training camp. And like the other thing you have to keep in mind, especially with NBA, like there's 11 guys on that roster. The money can be spread a lot further around. But yeah, I mean, top tier, top talent in the NHL gets paid the same as NBA bench players. It's crazy. Let's end it on this, Megan. People in the chat talking about Nikolai Ehlers. You and I were speaking a little bit about him on the way out. I mean, what is this guy going to get 15 by the end of the day?
So it made me think of a couple of things. On one hand, I think this is just emphasizing the market for centers and why Brock Nelson's contract is perhaps good business to see Granlund get that kind of money. Did Ehlers just sign? What happened?
No, John Klingberg got $4 million in San Jose. That's crazy.
I feel like I'm in the office and I just like panned to the other camera room to break the wall.
Yeah, that. Sorry,
See,
I didn't mean
okay.
to fully cut you off, but that,
you know what? This is what I'm saying. This free agency, everyone's overpaying defensemen and centers. And so Ehlers, a winger with a little bit of an injury history, though very productive and can hang in any top six, I don't know what he'll command. I hope it's a lot of money. I think he's a really good player, but I do think there's something to be said for there is a huge market for centers, and maybe we should just take a deep breath and sigh of relief for Brock Nelson's deal being done, because it might have gotten actually insane.
100%. And again, San Jose is a team that's got money to spend, so I'm sure there's part of this about like them just getting to the floor, but John Klingberg getting $4 million for 1 year, that's That is what I was expecting to have happen all over the board today. Like, I thought we were going to be getting all kinds of stuff like that. Teams overpaying like crazy. And I guess maybe now here it comes. Apparently, Bob McKenzie did just say once again on TSN, the Avs are in on Ehlers with the injury history that, you know, you and I were talking about on the way out, the practice facility. Now I'm like getting nervous about, okay, shit, if you do get in on Ehlers, what is that going to cost you?
It can't be too crazy. I hope that there's incentive on Ehlers' side of it to be in Colorado and play for this team. That is maybe the leverage that the Avs have in this situation. I'm still not over the Klingberg contract. It's more than they're paying Will Eklund. Like, and he barely assumed a third pair role. Like he was hanging out there, but it just felt like I talked about this. I felt like everyone just played a rung up too high from where they should be in that decor. But anyways, I won't get hung up on these crazy signings, but I will keep an eye out on Nikki Ehlers, because if there isn't a crazy overpay involved, I have interest in him in Colorado, especially now that Duran is not going to be an option for the Avs. That's certainly good Gabriel Landeskog insurance if there's a world where he's not playing full 82-game season. Nikki Ehlers isn't bad to have in your top 6.
Last question. We were talking about it before. I don't know if you weren't in the room or if you... Thoughts on Brent Burns?
I like it. A price permitting. Right. I like it. Fine.
1 year deal, something like that. His name is still floating out there. The Avs need to replace Ryan Lindgren. I just thought that was at least a name that made you kind of double take. You know, right-handed shot.
Just getting a little older, but
he's 40, so it'd be a 1 year deal for sure.
But I don't hate it. We still have to see where Rick Johnson goes too. What he's doing.
Who I do believe was getting in some work today at the practice facility. That's gonna do it. Odds are we won't jump back on later, but if the Avs really do pull off something big out of their sleeve, we will jump back on for an emergency pod. Otherwise, we'll be back at it with a pod tomorrow, so it's not like we're going to be gone for a long time. You will hear more from us tomorrow. Megan, what's that? Are you just that sad that we're ending the pod?
I just think San Jose is being kind of weird. They just signed Adam Gaudette to a 2x2 mil, and I'm like, this is the one that had the crystals. You know, that hockey player that allegedly utilized crystals. And I always thought that was so fun, but I also didn't think he was a full-time NHLer. And I'm not trying to be mean, but now he's gonna make more than Parker Kelly. So
yeah,
it's just kind of crazy whatever San Jose's got going on. I also wanted your hot take on Parker Kelly's extension.
Oh, I think it's great. You know, this is a guy that, like, look, there's going to be people out there that are just going to count up his point totals and say that he wasn't good. I think this is a heart and soul type signing. He's centered, you know, one of, if not the best fourth line in the NHL in the playoffs. And like, look, if you can get your forward core down to, we're trying to address our third line, and that's all that you really need to address, you're in really, really good shape. And I just think giving the deal to Parker Kelly gives you that security, meat and potatoes guy that you absolutely need. And now it's him and Logan O'Connor on that fourth line, you know, for the next half decade. And I think that's something the Avs are excited about.
I think as the cap continues to go up and up and up, that will just continue to be a good value contract. And I know that we talk about how, you know, with some of these depth players, you can always find guys like that coming into camp each year, PTOs and such. But I think Parker Kelly elevated a step above that expectation. So I really do like this extension.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think, again, maybe not exactly what I was expecting them to get done today, like as the first bit of business, but hey, I don't have an issue with it. That's for sure. Anything else?
He has another year too. So like it wasn't a priority. It just okay. Are they going to sign Jack Drury too?
And I mean, I guess maybe that also just speaks to like
how much they love him.
Well, to say the Avs like Parker Kelly. Parker Kelly likes being here. The Logan O'Connor one when it came through last year again, it's like, all right, it maybe wasn't exactly what I was expecting the first thing to be, but sometimes the negotiations are just easy, and it's like, yeah, we can get this done while we're doing everything else. So I really liked it. I thought that was a smart bit of business, and by the time you get to the end of that contract, with the way the cap is going to go up, that is going to be a minuscule portion of your salary cap. I think it's a really smart bit of business.
Me too. That's it for real now.
That's it for real for 10 more minutes until the Avs do something as soon as we sign off.
Good.
That's it. She's Meghan Angley. I'm Jesse Montano. Grill Sports Off Ice will be back tomorrow with another episode of Grill Sports Off Ice from the Avs practice facility. More interviews, all that good stuff coming your way. Make sure you guys are checking out everything from development camp today. Francesco Deleche, Sean Behrens, who else did we talk to there? Taylor McCarr, and Jack Fisher. Go check them all out. Jake off. I don't even deserve this show. I don't even deserve this anymore. That's going to do it. She's Megan. I'm Jesse. We'll talk to you guys later. Have a good one.
Bye.